in chapter 5, 6, and 7, there's a famous sermon that Jesus preached called the Sermon on the Mount. And then the Sermon on the Mount begins with these things that say, "Blessed are you if," and basically Jesus' premise is blessed. The Hebrew translation, the literal translation of the Hebrew word that he uses when he says, "Blessed are those who mourn," is Jesus is saying happy. Happy are those who do these things, and it seems like it's a contrary message to what we think. And before I jump into that, I'm going to get to that kind of at the end of the message. I'll get back to the Beatitudes. But I kind of wanted to start here today, and I wanted to ask this question. Have you ever been squeezed? Have you ever been squeezed? I'll be honest, I've been squeezed my whole life. My entire life. Maybe you're not familiar with that term of being squeezed, but I'm not talking about when you're the cute little cheeky fellow and 2 years old and the aunts and grandmas squeezing your cheeks like maybe some of you guys have gotten my son Cody and wanted to squeeze his cheeks. He's kind of not that kind of squeeze. I'm talking about, does anybody have any older brothers and sisters? Okay, did anybody ever have an older brother or sister who tortured you growing up? Maybe they hold you down and they pin you on the ground and they've got their knees are buried right here into your shoulders and they're hitting you like that. Or maybe they tickle you until you pee your pants just so they can make fun of you. Squeezed. I mean, this is the family I grew up in. I was the youngest of 4, and my older brother, sometimes the torture techniques are stuff that you would see on Hollywood films to believe what my brother put me through. He taught me how to swim when I was in kindergarten. His way of teaching me to swim was to push me off the diving board and tell me, "Now, figure it out." I learned how to swim. It was effective. It was terrible, but it was effective. It was squeezed, and I'd like to say that at home was the only place I've ever been squeezed. But have you ever been squeezed in school? I was the new kid a lot. I moved all the time when I was growing up. My parents divorced, and I'd bounce in between houses, and they all both moved a lot. And the new kid going into the lunchroom, and then suddenly there was seats at a table you were going to sit at, but not for you. Or maybe you're getting on the bus and all the kids sit to the inside seat and you can't get to a seat in the bus because nobody really wants to open one up for you. You're being squeezed. Or maybe there's been times at work when I've gotten a job and maybe I'm doing too good of a job. I don't know if anybody's ever worked in a shop before, but there have been shops that I've worked in where maybe I was, performing a little faster than I'm supposed to, and I would get squeezed. People trying to get me to slow down because I'm making them look bad. And squeezed. Has anybody ever been squeezed at home, in life, and work? And some of you have been squeezed in marriages. Some of you have been squeezed in relationships. I think all of us as humans know what it's like to be squeezed. And when you get squeezed, something comes out. Something comes out. I always talk about squeezing. I'm kind of thirsty. Is there anybody here who's strong? John, you're strong. Just come on up here. Former military guy. Not only military, special forces. He's strong. You want to shake my hand? Squeeze. I figured that wasn't good. Hey! He's going to get me for real next time. So I need some orange juice. It's breakfast time. Bring that back. Help me out, okay? Orange juice. Yeah, orange juice. I'm thirsty. You're strong. Make it happen. Figure it out. All right, so anyway, here, I'll take some water because I think this is going to take a while. He wants to chat. Tell me it's going to happen right away. Okay.
I got some food.
All right. So, have you ever been squeezed? So, whatever, when we get squeezed, something that's inside of us is going to come out. And before I launch into where we're going, I kind of want to recap a little bit of last week, just in case you weren't here, or maybe you weren't paying attention through the whole thing, or maybe you took a nap, or whatever it is. I want to just start from the springboard of where we left last week. And last week I asked this question: have you ever been stuck in a rut? And a rut would be something that you get stuck in, that you have a hard time getting out of. And we talked about these ruts that we get in life where, we want to make a change, but we can't make a change, and we're kind of stuck. And what we really came down to is our relationship with God. And we talked about these two ruts. And they could be places where we think we're following after God. Either we grew up in a religious system, and we think the way to God is through obeying a whole bunch of rules and regulations, and if I don't obey all these rules, then God's not happy with me, but as long as I obey these rules and maybe don't hang out with people who don't, or don't like the people who don't, or talk about the people who don't obey those rules, maybe I'm okay with God as long as I'm living up to this law. And of course, Jesus came to say that that's not the way we're supposed to live. But then we get caught in this other rut of lawlessness, and lawlessness says that I can do whatever I want to and God's okay with it. I can live however I want. I can treat people however I want. I can talk however I want. I'll do whatever I want and God will forgive me, right? Because God's gracious, and pretending that everything's okay just as long as, okay, so you can get stuck in either one of those ruts, okay? And then we talked about the fear of the Lord. Remember, the fear of the Lord. I get to go forward? Yes. The fear of the Lord is the starting place for knowing God intimately. And what the fear of the Lord is basically there's this narrow road here. This narrow road. And I'll just kind of turn that into a road. But this narrow road, the fear of the Lord keeps us on. You see, it's not being afraid of God. It's respecting God. It's believing God is who He says He is, instead of who I think He is. There's a big difference between God being who He says He is and God being who I think He is. Because who God says He is He says He's a God who's holy, that He's a God who's just, that He's a God who's righteous. But He's a God who wants to have a relationship with a schmuck like me. That's a big cataclysmic difference. We got to figure out this God who wants to have a relationship with us. But Jesus said that road is narrow. As a matter of fact, the fear of the Lord, the Bible, we're going to read this out of Psalm 25:14. It says, the Lord is a friend to those who fear Him, and He teaches them His covenant. And this is the big deal here, is if we do not spend time in the presence of God, our image of God will be shaped by the world. So if we don't spend time in the presence of God, we're actually going to live over here in this area of lawlessness and think God's okay with anything I do. Or we're going to get around some religious people who are going to make us think that we've got to live up to every single line and rule, and if we do anything wrong, God hates us now, and maybe, if something happens, then you got to wait for Sunday morning to pray to get things right with God because, you looked at a girl the wrong way, or whatever it is that, draws you off. But, so either one of those, Jesus is saying, is not the way to live. But it's to live in daily communion. And as a matter of fact, Jesus talked about if you're in either one of these ditches. I compared these ditches to 113. But I'm told that in Bowling Green there are worse ditches in Ohio even than what I've seen in Florence. But I know that in the wintertime I was happy to have my Jeep so that I didn't end up in either side of the road on 113 because neither looked really appealing. And my 17-year-old still don't have his license, and that's partly to do. But Jesus said, you can enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. The highway to hell is broad, and its gate is wide for the men who choose that way. But the gateway to life is very narrow, and the road is difficult, and only a few ever find it. What does this have to do with being happy? And what does this have to do with being squeezed and fruit? All that. So, one of the titles that I have for this message is Fruit, Juice, and What Happens When You're Squeezed. And I think I put that in your notes as one of the lines in there. I've kind of been sitting on this my whole life and living it my whole life, you see. Understanding that when I'm squeezed and what comes out is actually a gift from God. It lets me know if I'm living in either one of these ditches. I don't know it. You see, I can live in either one of these and think everything is okay. And I might not even realize. I might not even realize that I'm judging people who don't have as easy of a time as a walk with me as me. I might not even realize that I'm letting things slide in my life that I would even allow or think it was okay if someone else were doing it. I can live in either one of those ditches because it's easy to get squeezed. And in this Sermon on the Mount, what we just read about that narrow road is how Jesus is closing this Sermon on the Mount. But he follows that up with these verses, and I thought we would kind of, sort of, as we spring into where this message is going to begin at the end. And this is what Jesus said. Beware, let's read this out loud. Beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep, but are really vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruit, that is, by the way they act. Can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? A good tree produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. Yes, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions. So you can identify people by their actions. And if you haven't been with us for the whole series, I want to remind everyone what Jesus says at the beginning of Matthew chapter 7. He says, don't judge others, because for the same measurement that you judge others, you yourself will be judged. And then he ends the chapter with this, yes, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions. It almost sounds like Jesus is contradicting himself, doesn't it? Don't judge people or get fruit. Don't. How do you close that gap? Do you remember what Jesus said? He said we shouldn't judge others. We should judge ourselves. If we would judge ourselves, then we would not need to be judged. If we could simply look at what happens in our own life when we get squeezed. In our own life when we get squeezed. We could identify what kind of fruit we're producing, and we could deal with the problem. And the other thing I want to remind us about before I forget is we're going to. Do you guys remember who Jesus was talking to in the Sermon on the Mount? Was he talking to everybody, or was he talking to his disciples? So if you call yourself a disciple of Christ, this is who he's talking to. He's talking to us as disciples. He's saying, don't judge people that are out in the world. That's not your job. That's God's job. Our job is to judge ourselves and amongst ourselves, to figure out whether we're following after God, to look at our own lives and see what kind of fruit we're producing. And is it the fruit that leads us to happy? Is it the fruit that leads us to happy? Because here's what I know. Here's what I know. And this is human. This isn't just Christian. This isn't. You can be of any faith, of any religion, non-religion. You can be an atheist. And this is just a human condition. We tend to judge ourselves by our intentions, but others by their actions. And Jesus is telling us to judge ourselves by our actions. What actually happens. And so, to help with this whole fruit talk, the Apostle Paul took this a step further. Actually, Galatians chapter 5 is kind of a mirror of the Sermon on the Mount. It's like Paul's teaching from what Jesus taught, much like I'm teaching from what Jesus and Paul taught. But in Paul's teaching on the fruit of the Spirit, we're just going to read through this. I'll read it. You can just sit back and listen. So I say, let the Holy Spirit guide your lives, then you won't be doing what your sinful nature craves. The sinful nature wants to do evil, which is just the opposite of what the Spirit wants, and the Spirit gives us desires that are opposite of what the sinful nature desires. These two forces are constantly fighting each other, so you are not free to carry out your good intentions. Not free. See, we want to live on this narrow road, but it seems like when we get squeezed, we end up in one ditch or the other. We end up in one ditch or the other, and the fear of the Lord is the thing that pulls us out of those ditches. I'm going to read on. But when you are directed by the Spirit, you are not under the obligation to the law. You see, when you're directed by the Spirit, you're not under this system of rules that says I have to do every single thing right or God's mad at me. Has anyone ever grown up believing God was mad at you? There was a time I believed God was mad at me. I don't believe God's mad at us. I believe He wants a relationship with us, that He wants to know us. That He wants us to sing that song, what a friend we have in Jesus, and us actually know Him personally. But people who are led by the Spirit, they're not under the obligation to the law. When you follow the desires of your sinful nature, the results are very clear, though. Sexual immorality, impurity, lustful pleasures, idolatry, sorcery, hostility, quarreling, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambition, dissension, division. I'm going a little fast. I went through this in week 2 of this series. I went through this once. Envy, drunkenness, wild parties, and other sins like these. Let me tell you again, as I have before, that anyone living that sort of life will not inherit the kingdom of God. But the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives. Love. Let's read these out loud. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against these things. So what Jesus is telling us is just because we don't live here doesn't mean that we have to live here. But we should live this kind of fruit. We all need a little more love. Don't you wish love came out when you were squeezed? Oh, don't you wish love came out when you were squeezed? We all need some more joy. Don't you wish joy came out when you were squeezed? Peace. Oh, patience. Couldn't we all use some patience when we're squeezed? Those of us who are parents when your kids are squeezing you, don't you need some patience? Come on, you know they squeeze you. Kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. There's no law. John, do you got my drink ready yet?
I'm having a difficult time with that. I just, I don't know. I'm gonna come out front, maybe we can figure it out.
Dude, how old are you?
I'm not old enough. Maybe I'm too young.
I thought you were strong enough to like get some juice out of that thing in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think maybe it's been squeezed hopeless.
Oh, wait, I heard something.
I heard something. Well, it doesn't look like orange juice. I don't know.
I want it to be orange juice. It's going to be orange juice.
Yeah, I think we have to try it. See if that's
I want it to be orange
maybe
juice.
it's the color green.
John, that is the worst orange juice I've ever tasted.
Thank you.
Get out of here. I wanted it to be orange juice.
Well, when life gives you lemon, you gotta have lemonade.
That's not lemonade.
Oh.
That's the problem with the fruit of the spirit, too, isn't it? We want something to come out other than what's inside. You see, when I get squeezed, I want love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control, long suffering. I want all those things to come out of me, but so often, what comes out of me isn't what I wanted to come out. So often I'm drinking lemon juice instead of orange juice because the fruit on the tree. And I mean, let's just get real. Let's see, one of those things on that list of the root of the flesh is envy. Oh, I don't have a problem with envy. You say you don't have a problem with envy. What about the last time that car drove by? I don't know what your car is. Mine would be a Dodge Challenger. Maybe your car is a Camaro. Maybe your car is a Jeep Wrangler with the big tires that's great for going off-road. You know what I mean, that car? That car that every time you see it's like, man, car. Well, maybe for you it's a house. Somebody who lives down the street. Somebody has a really nice house and wish you had a house like that. Anger. I talked about our kids squeezing us, and sometimes we get angry when they squeeze, right? Am I the only one who ever has an outburst of anger when I'm squeezed? Come on. Yes. You never have an outburst. Exactly. So what are we supposed to learn here? What are those things that come out when we squeeze, but it's something different than we wanted to? I wish I was the most patient person in the world with my children. I wish I never had an outburst of anger. I wish I never had a drop of envy when a person in a certain color Dodge Challenger drives by and that sound of it. I wish there wasn't that. I wish there was only happiness and so happy together. I wish it was warm and fuzzy all the time coming out of me. I wish that I was that close to Jesus to where I knew I was always on the narrow road. But why does God allow things to come out when we're squeezed that are less than what we want to be? To point us back to the very first 2 verses in Matthew chapter 5 that tells us that the way to be on that narrow road is to be at the feet of Jesus, being his disciple. It's the fear of the Lord. It pulls us out of either one of those ditches. It keeps us thinking that just because I'm better than Joe down the street, I might not be that great of a person, but at least I'm not, an alcoholic, or at least I don't beat my wife, or at least I don't, whatever it is, you want to throw a stone at Joe who lives down the street. So you think you're okay and you can live lawlessly just because you're better than someone down the street. Chances are so-and-so down the street ain't even trying to follow Christ. You are. So you don't judge yourself against Joe down the street or Joy down the street or whatever her name is. I don't know. So judge yourself against this standard that Christ has. Because what happens, just like that lemon, is when we are squeezed, we discover what is inside. And it gives us an opportunity to not be duped into thinking we're following after God when we're actually living in a ditch. And Jesus, and we always want to fix as humans. I have an outburst of anger with my children. What do I begin to pray to God? Oh, God, help me with my anger issues. Maybe you have a problem with lust. You find yourself looking a little too long at somebody you shouldn't be looking at. You say, God, help me with my lust. Maybe you have a problem with envy. You say, God, help me with that, even if you even recognize it as a sin. That's one of those ones we don't recognize. Kind of like gluttony, I can live it and love it. And no one ever even says anything about it. But all those things are there to pull us back to Christ. And the human tendency is to try to fix the fruit. Try to fix the fruit. Try to fix the fruit. As a matter of fact, we can have children who don't believe in God. And we want to fix the way they behave. It's behavior modification that we're interested in more than a heart change. The whole thing Jesus is pointing to in the Sermon on the Mount, don't miss it, is he wants us to deal with the root and not the fruit. Because the root is the source of the fruit. No matter how hard John squeezed that lemon, he was never going to get orange juice out of it. No matter how hard he tried to make that lemon into orange juice, it was never going to happen. He could have painted it orange, he could have made it pretty, he could have put it in a machine to make it round, he could have put the picture of it on the box of a Tropicana container. He's never going to make that lemon into an orange, but yet we try to fix ourselves from the outside in. From the outside in. From the outside in. But Jesus gives us the secret to happy. And the secret is that we're not fixed from the outside in. The thief doesn't stop stealing from the outside in. Sure, you can throw them in jail, and they'll still be a thief in jail. People are fixed from the inside out. From the inside out. Remember what that word beatitude means? Supreme blessedness, exalted happiness. And rather than read through all of the Beatitudes again, I invite you, take your Bibles, open them up when you're at home, read the first 12 verses of Matthew chapter 5. And you're going to find a bunch of blessings. And I don't know if you can read these with me, but I'll read them out. There's 9 of them. And you remember the first 4 deal with our relationship with God, a vertical relationship, and the last 5 deal with horizontal. Blessed are the poor in spirit. You know who the poor in spirit are? The ones who can see when they're in either one of these ditches. You can say, blessed are you. You're going to be happy if you can recognize that you're in one of these ditches and say, God, help me out. Blessed are those who mourn, and that mourn is specifically those who mourn over their sin. Those who mourn over their lack of relationship with God. Those who mourn because they want to be closer to Christ. Blessed are the meek. They're the ones who say, you know what? I don't have it all together. Instead of saying, why can't everybody be more like me? Has anybody ever felt like if everyone was more like me, the world would be a better place? Yeah, I've struggled with that too. Blessed are those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. It's It's really hard to live here. In this rules kind of religion, if you'd grown up in that, it's really hard to live there and be merciful. Because you are trying to obey all these rules, and it's really hard and difficult, and you're trying to fix yourself from the outside in, and you become bitter with everyone in the world, Christian and non-Christian, because they don't live up to the system of rules that you deem as what's wrong and right, and they should change, and you can get really bitter living in that ditch. Blessed are the merciful. Ones who can say, God, I know they're not following you. Can you change them? Can you change them from the inside out, just like you're changing me from the inside out? Blessed are the pure in heart. Those are the ones who actually, that's really who they are and not how they show you on the outside. The ones who aren't fake, the ones who are real with their faith, the ones who really are merciful, not those who just say they are. Blessed are the peacemakers. Man, I'm not always a peacemaker, but I sure want to be. And I'm sure glad that when I have the issues where I see myself not being a peacemaker, it lets me know that I need to get out of this ditch. Blessed are the persecuted and insulted. That's for all of us who have followed after God and worked like God, and people hate us for doing the right thing. Blessed are you when that happens. But Jesus is telling us how to fix the root instead of the fruit. Because if you fix the root, the fruit will take care of itself. If I would have picked that fruit that I gave John off of an orange tree, I would have had no problem at all getting orange juice. Right? It's the wrong tree. We need to find ourselves planted in Christ. And as I thought about this message, I thought about the very real danger. The very real danger is that we would walk out of this church today thinking, man, I wish so-and-so would have been here to hear Pastor John's message. I don't know who Pastor John was talking to, but man, he must be a really bad person. If only so-and-so would have heard this, then that relationship wouldn't have been broken. The danger is that we would walk out of here thinking that I'm talking about somebody else when I'm talking about not only me, but every single one of us have this issue. Every single one of us. The world, the flesh, and the devil are fighting to get us into one of those two ditches. You're following after God, you think that's enough, but Jesus said there's something more to this life than just believing. He said to judge others by the way they act. Not by what they believe, not by what they think, not what they intend, but what they do. And we can get stuck in either one of these ditches. And I'm reminded as I was reading, and I was reminded there's this scripture in Revelations chapter 3. There's this church in Laodicea. And Jesus comes to the Apostle John, and he has this message for this church. And they're a church that are sitting in pews, maybe not too different than the ones we're sitting in. And Jesus' message to this church at Laodicea, he said, you think you are rich and have need of nothing. You think you are on this road, this narrow road. You think everything's fine with you and God. You think you are rich and have need of nothing. You don't know. You're poor, miserable, blind, and naked. You think you're producing oranges. You're producing lemons. And then he said, you're lukewarm. I want to spew you out of my mouth. I'm asking you to buy of me white clothes, and eye salve that you might see. And then, I believe this picture is on the door, is in the hallway out here. It's a picture from Revelation chapter 3. It says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice, let him open up, and I'll come in and I'll have a meal with him. I'll spend time with him." So Jesus is knocking on our heart's door and saying, where is this fruit that you don't want in your life? Invite me into that area. Don't pretend that it's okay. Invite me in. And then we'll be on this narrow road. We'll be on that narrow road. That narrow road is the path that leads to heaven on earth, and not just hereafter. Let's get on that narrow road. Don't be deceived into thinking everything's okay just because you're better than whatever down the street when you're judging and you're not supposed to judge. I digress. Sin whispers to the wicked deep within their hearts, and they have no fear of God at all. Stuck in the ditch, they don't have the fear of God. In their blind conceit, they cannot see how wicked they really are. That's Psalms 36, 1 and 2. And then I'm going to close right here. This is going to be the last verse I'll put up. And I think this next verse will be the last one put up. But I think this is the condition of our world that we live in. In the book of Judges, in those days, Israel had no king. And all the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. If we only do what seems right in our own eyes, we'll live in that ditch. And we'll die in that ditch. And we will never experience life in Christ. We will never experience happiness. If you want to know how to see that fruit in our lives, remember the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace. Aren't these all characteristics of Christ? Greater love has no man than this, but that he laid down his life for his friends. Joy, it says in Hebrews, for the joy set before him, he endured death, even death on the cross. Peace, it says in Isaiah, when he comes, he's the Prince of Peace. You keep going through, they all point to Jesus, and anytime we look at Jesus, we look at sacrifice. And anytime we have that characteristic of sacrifice at our root, we know we're on that narrow path. And then what comes out when we're squeezed is going to be all good. And on that thought of sacrifice, as I pray, the ushers are going to come forward. We're going to receive communion together. To remember this characteristic of Jesus. This characteristic of Jesus who is the fruit of the Spirit. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you in the name of Jesus. And Lord, we're so thankful for the signs in our life that let us know that we're off in either one of those ditches. And I know, God, there have been times in my life when I've been in both ditches at the same time. I've been in a religious ditch that makes me think less of others while I myself am lawless in the way that I act, God. And I pray that as a people, as your church is right here, God, that you would, by the fear of the Lord, help us come out of the ditch. As we prepare our hearts for communion, Lord, I pray that you would just move in us. Move in us to see you more clearly, to show us how to answer the door that you're knocking on, that you want to come in and you want to be closer to us. Help us to see that in communion, in your body and in your blood, that we would experience the fruit of the Spirit in our lives, so that we can live outside of that ditch. In your name, Jesus, I pray.